Hi there. This is Jack Jack. Say hi, Jack. The bottom fell out. Put up there. This is Splish. Say hi, Splish. His brother Splash. He had a brother named Splash, but unfortunately he didn't make it. We brought this little guy home. He didn't even have all of his feathers yet. My wife hand-fed him until he was old enough to go out into the loft with the rest of them. He was out of 6, I think he's the only one left. Is that right?
No, the black one, there's a black.
That's right, there's that little black and white spotted one. I don't know if we ever gave him a name or not.
Nope.
He was out here a while ago.
He's somewhere.
But those guys were a little bit older. This one was young. It wasn't even feathered, close to being feathered. It was still covering him down. He's just a big baby. This is Little Stud. We call him that because his daddy's, well, Stud. Someday we might be surprised and find out that this is Little Studette, but for the time being, this is Little Stud. He is a cross. He's a cross between an Indian Fantail and an American Fantail. His daddy Stud is an Indian Fantail, and Mama, who is no longer with us, she was an American Fantail. These guys, I kind of got them spoiled. I usually give them a little corn, but they seem to be helping themselves. Okay, there's Splish again. Here's a little guy here. This guy, we brought him home. He wasn't very old. He's got a little gray heart on. Looks like a gray heart on his back when his wings are folded down. So we call him Heart, or her Heart. That remains to be seen.
I just have trouble focusing.
This is a youngster, so until they reach maturity, it's kind of difficult to determine gender on pigeons. So most of the time they're all he until we find out different. These guys are homing pigeons. Well, the Little Stud is obviously a fantail, but most of these guys are homing pigeons. These guys, we try to let them out of their loft on a daily basis, and they'll take off and they'll fly a while and check things out, and then they'll come home. These guys can actually be taken some distance from home, and they can be released, and they'll fly home. These guys are actually bred for racing. Unfortunately, not a lot of pigeon racing goes on in this area, so we mainly just keep them for enjoyment. You know, if you ever wanted live feathers to go on your hat, well, you know, you could take these guys. They pretty much, you can have live feathers on your hat, see? As long as they don't step on the bill and hit my hat and make it fall. You would think that these guys love me. Well, that's not necessarily the case. What they love is what I'm holding. And if you have pigeons, there's a lot of different pigeons will eat a lot of different grains and what have you. This is whole corn. Geese love it too. If you have pigeons and you want to give them corn as a treat, it's best to give them whole corn. Cracked corn has little sharp edges where the pieces break apart, and they can actually scratch a pigeon's throat as they swallow it, and it can leave little scratches in there, and it makes it canker, it's easier for canker to develop in their throats and start growing. So while they can eat chopped corn like chickens and ducks and just about everything else with a beak, it's best for them to have whole corn. Not to mention if you're going to the feed store and buying this stuff, the whole corn's a little cheaper because it costs a little bit to crack it. So after we started buying whole corn for the pigeons, we found out that the chickens and the ducks and the geese and everything, they eat it. So we just started buying the whole corn instead of buying it, instead of buying whole corn and cracked corn.
Yeah, that's one of the roosters.
Little stud again. This is a fantail. Now the fantails, we let them out. We let them out and they kind of fly around in the area. Most of the time they don't leave the backyard area here around the loft. So we have a couple of fantails that Eagle over there, sitting on the rabbit hutch. He went for a fly with the homers earlier, I noticed, but most of the pigeons, fantail pigeons, they stay around close to home. If they get very far from home, they'll actually get lost. The fantails will, but the homers, they've been known to find that they race these guys up to distances of around 600 miles. They can be taken as much as 600 miles from home, and they'll find their way home. Usually within a day or so. This can become a nuisance. You might think this is neat, to have pigeons this tame and where you can play with them and what have you. And in a way it is, but if you were just going to come out here and sit down in the backyard and relax, it can become a nuisance when you constantly have pigeons flying up and getting on your hat, on your shoulder, and what have you, because they think you're going to give them something to eat. So anytime you come out in the yard, you can pretty well plan on getting attacked by a pigeon. He's going to fly up and sit on your shoulder or something, and he's going to kind of try to whisper in your ear and say, hey, you got any of that corn? I mean, these guys, they actually eat a chicken layer pellet and some other things, but they love the corn. They act like it's almost like a drug to them that the guy, you have corn. Well, the chickens are the same way. If you have corn, they'll ignore everything else that they have to eat, and they'll go for the corn every single time. So this has to be given as a treat after they've eaten, because otherwise they won't eat their feed. And as a result, they won't end up getting enough protein and other nutrients and what have you that's in their feed that they eat. I found out, I thought, when I first got pigeons, I thought that, a pigeon, they should know, they're a bird, right? They should know how to eat corn. Well, those corn kernels are big enough that the pigeons, they actually have to learn how to eat it. They have to train it a certain way so that they can swallow it, the bigger ones. At first, the young pigeons, when you start them on this corn, they'll pick it out of your hand and they'll drop most of it. Probably 8 or 9 out of 10 kernels they'll drop on the ground. It takes them a little while to learn how to eat it, but once they do, hardly ever does a kernel hit the floor. If it does, you better not be in the way, because everybody's going to try to get it at once. I don't know if you can see them through the trees, but there's a couple of guys I think that's going to fly through here. They're flying over there. You probably can't see them, but there's a couple of pigeons that are kind of, what they do around home, if they like to go flying, they'll kind of like go out in a circle around their loft, and they'll fly in circles. And these guys, they love to fly. I mean, you see these guys sitting here, but we let those out well over an hour ago, and they went away and they flew, and they were gone for probably 30 to 45 minutes. And at the speed they could fly, that means they could have gone, they might have gone 20 miles, or more maybe even. But go on, guys. but they went for a little flight, and they come back. So they'll sit around here and they'll rest a while now. And they pretty much, we let them out and they'll pretty much stay around the place, or they'll go out flying in circles around the place and come back home. And usually they pretty much put themselves to bed. When we let them out, we leave the door to the aviary. We leave it propped open, and they can fly back in there and then go through a hole in the wall and go back into their loft where their perches are. That's where they sleep at night. So for the most part, just shortly before dark, we can go out and close that up. And most of the time, everybody's already put themselves to bed. Occasionally, we might have to catch one or two that just decided he didn't want to go to bed that night, and we'll have to catch him and manually put him in the loft. But most of the time, they'll put themselves to bed. Pigeons can be some of the easiest animals to take care of. You can actually have these as pets. More than likely, the Fantails would probably make a better pet. I'm not saying you couldn't make a pet out of a Homer. I'm not saying these guys are pets, but if you had a big cage, a person could keep these, like people keep parrots, cockatiels, and things like that in their house. If you had a big cage, you could keep one of these guys. And you could actually, if you had a homing pigeon, you could actually let him out of his cage, let him outside, let him go for a fly, and he'll go for a fly, and then he'll come right back to you and come back to the house. To do a lot of things, you have to train these guys, and as you can see, to train them, mainly they go where the food goes. So to get them do what you want them to do, and then after a while it just becomes a habit. For instance, when we feed them, we whistle, and usually in the evening, if these guys are still outside, we go in and put some food down in their trough, and we start whistling in it, and these guys will all start at once. They'll start flying in, and they'll come in the door. When they hear that whistle, they know it's time to eat, so they'll come inside. I used to know how many pigeons were here, but now it's not sure. We've got some pigeons inside that are actually they're pigeons that were actually originally they made their home somewhere else other than in this loft. And unfortunately, when you get a pigeon that someone else that has settled and made their home at someone else's loft, unfortunately, in most cases, for the rest of that pigeon's life, you actually have to do what we call keep them as a prisoner. And they can't be let out to fly anymore. Because if we let them out to fly, they're going to go and return to the home of their original loft. They're going to go back to where they were raised, where they were settled. And those are mainly animals that we have that are raising babies. We've got actually 2 pairs right now that I know of in there that are actually sitting on eggs, and I think in a couple of days, this is Sunday, I think on Wednesday, we're supposed to have, there's a pair of these guys that are white. Little white homers that are sitting on eggs, and they should hide. Hi, this is Blackie. He's been losing some tail feathers. This time of the year, they start to lose some tail feathers. You can see these old feathers. They start looking bad and ragged. And at a certain time of the year, they'll fall out. Usually around this time of year, they'll start falling out. And as you can see, here's new ones. See those coming in? Those new feathers right there? Those are new feathers coming back to replace the ones that fell out. And pigeons, they usually molt about once a year, just like a chicken or, chickens, ducks, everything this time of year seems like it's molting. You can come outside and it looks like somebody exploded a feather pillow because feathers are everywhere. But we were just sitting outside having fun with these guys, and we thought, well, why not get the camera? We'll make a little video to share with you guys.